Hello, this is Sarah from Hardcover Hearts, and I'm here today to talk about my Victober experience. And let's just say it was so delightful that I'm calling this a Victober victory video. I had a phenomenal time, and I would like to start off by making a toast with my Victorian lemonade by Fentimans, a botanically brewed beverage. I'm raising a Victorian lemonade to the 4 hosts of Victober. And so that is Katie over at Books and Things. It's Ange from Beyond the Pages, Katie Howe, as well as Lucy the Breeder. So cheers, ladies. You did a phenomenal job, and I cannot wait to do this again next year. Oh, that's good. So let's talk about everything that went on and transpired during Victober. So first of all, I'll link my TBR down below of what I thought I would do. I did that and more. I really knocked it out of the park, so to speak. I hate sports metaphors, but I use them pretty frequently. I wanted to go deep into reading that I'd never done before, and I thought this was the perfect opportunity. So previous to this month, I've been really intimidated by some of the classics. I just thought, oh, they're weighty, they're heavy, the language is really different, it's going to take so long to get into, and so I think I kept them at a distance. Having an opportunity to jump right in and do it with a bunch of other people and watch other videos and have those kind of conversations with others really helped me get over that fear and get over that trepidation of just jumping in. So I did a total of 10 Victorian related books. Most of them were Victorian classics. A few were nonfiction and 2 were modern books set in Victorian times to kind of break it up a little bit. But fundamentally, I only read one book this month that was not Victorian, and that was Happiness, because I wanted to finish it for the BookTube Prize meetup. Other than that, it was solid Victorian literature the entire month, which I'm shocked. I'm shocked that I didn't rebel against it because that is kind of my nature. So, good job, me. So let's get to what the successes specifically were. In this month, I read my first Elizabeth Gaskell, and that was North and South. And I also got a chance to purchase and read these phenomenal little Pan Macmillan books. I'm such a fan of these now. I'm completely in love with them, though. When I look on websites, because I keep looking for them in stores, but they're not easy to find. They have a few ranges. I think I'm going to stick to the Victorian ones because I think they're perfect for this type of thing. So this is absolutely my favorite. Absolutely my favorite. This is North and South, and as if you've been watching and I've been talking about this, just so many rave reviews and so many people commenting that this is the book. Y'all, no lie, this is the book. It is fantastic, absolutely fantastic. This ending was so satisfying. Now, I can't spoil or anything like that, but I'm also not going to talk too much about it because I'm reading this with Jacqueline at 6 Minutes for Me, and she hasn't finished yet. And so, funny story, I posted about finishing it and how I knocked out my Victober with a bang by completing this. And Olive at a Book Olive reached out and we had a chat on Twitter, and she said, "Have you read Wives and Daughters?" And I said, "No, I haven't." She goes, "Oh, you have to." And I said, "But I have so many nonfiction November books to read." And as you may know, Olive is leading the charge on Nonfiction November. I'll put a link below to her information there and my TBR of that. But she said, "Oh my God, I'm so conflicted because I really want you to read Wives and Daughters, but I also want you to do Nonfiction November." So I was cackling. It was quite funny, and that's a huge statement, right? So I will have to get Wives and Daughters into my mix somewhere. I think I might read that in December. So sold. This was fantastic. Hit every single thing that I care about. Women, workers, societal change, economic change, interpersonal, comedy of manners. Just this had everything. 5 stars. Okay, next up that I think I was absolutely gobsmacked by, The Way We Live Now by Anthony Trollope. This was sublime. So good. I get the Trollope fever now. I get it. I'm a Trollope fan. I'm going to read many, many more. This was a perfect start. All of you who said that you would suggested this over The Warden, thank you. This was amazing. I'm going to start The Warden, but this was fantastic. And FYI, no one told me that Melmotte is basically Trump. There's a Trump character in here. And very, very interesting. Literally, a con artist who scammed his way into success in upper echelons of society, then bought his way into the House of Commons, only to start to see everything start to crumble. So insanely relevant. Couldn't believe it. Fantastic book. I gave this 4 stars. Let me see. Then I also read my first Oscar Wilde works. So I read two. I read The Importance of Being Earnest, which was so much funnier than I expected it to be. It was witty and funny, and I do love a mistaken comedy of manners. I really do. I find those really entertaining. So that just hit all the marks. And then I read The Picture of Dorian Gray, which was also phenomenal. I gave that 4 stars. So seeing kind of different ranges from Wilde was wonderful. So that was great. And then I also read Villette by Charlotte Bronte. And Villette was remarkable. I think that was my 3rd favorite book. And Villette is one that I think it grows on you, and it's something that you think about after, and you start to respect it more, and it's gonna serve me well as I reread it next Victober. Yeah, this was so successful. I'm starting next year's TBR. The other book that I read, we did this as a buddy read, and it kind of all fell apart because we all needed to kind of approach it in different ways and at different paces. But that was The Pickwick Papers by Charles Dickens. I will say that this wasn't my favorite Dickens, of course. I didn't expect it to be. But you can see the seeds of where he's starting to think about class, about corruption, about the prison systems. All of these themes that he starts to put together are glimpses and glimmers found here. So that was very, very interesting. Let's see, what other things? I also did 2 nonfiction books as well as a Great Courses. I highly recommend doing that because it just gave, especially the Great Courses, if you have access to that through your library system, it was phenomenal. It was Victorian Britain. It was absolutely phenomenal. I think there was like 14 hours of classes, but it was so good, and it gave me so much context, and it really went deep into things like even the relationships with India, so stuff that sometimes is alluded to in Victorian literature, but because we don't have the frame, and we don't or many of us don't, I guess I should say, sometimes those just kind of fly by the wayside, and we don't really understand the significance. So I would highly recommend doing something like that if you haven't yet or are going to participate in Victober next year. And then the ideas generated. So many parallels between what's going on in our society today and what was happening in Victorian England. So first off, workers' rights. So Gaskell talks about it. We know Dickens talks about it in other books. He didn't really talk about it too much in the Pickwick Papers. And also in the nonfiction and the great courses, they talked a lot about what it was like for the workers to make the societal shift from the rural and kind of economies into the industrialization. And the great courses did a phenomenal job at explaining some of the challenges that were faced by the factory owners of trying to get their employees to come at a regular time, because the employees were used to kind of running their own schedules and out in the fields when they needed to and just getting the work done. And they would, if they wanted to take a break in the mid-afternoon, they would. If they wanted to work into the evening, they could. But as we know, a factory can't work that way. So many things to contemplate and parallels drawn between where we are today. I'm going to link into an article that I just came across that talked about your Uber driver may be retired and why that may not be a good thing for our economy. And a lot of it is about those protections that came from that we're losing now as we move into automation and technology out of where we have been as a manufacturing industrial society and economy. The environment plays a huge role in so many of the things that appeared in these books, specifically Gaskell. So there is a character who's very, very ill. Two characters are very ill. One is dying of consumption. Now, I know consumption is tuberculosis, but so many times they talk about the dirtiness of the cities and the coal in the air and the fog and the ways that the industrialization of these areas have really changed the landscape and made it grimier, made it more difficult to live in, less beautiful. And I think we're experiencing that as well now. Myself being here in the Bay Area, with the wildfires that are breaking out, and the response of the government, the PG&E, to the risk. And then corruption. So, and specifically how class and corruption play a hand. And so that was in Dickens and in Trollope. Dickens touched on it a little bit with like an election rigging and the manipulation of an election. And then Trollope talks about it so much in his book. It's a main feature of the willingness to allow corruption and the willingness to turn your head when it's something that you are gaining from. Fantastic. And then women's self-determination. Obviously, that came through in the Gaskell as well as the Charlotte Bronte Villette. It was just fantastic. So thrilled with the readings. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on was Brian at Bookish did a video about in one of his chats, and I'll link to that as well. But he talked about how he was kind of had a crush on Queen Victoria, and specifically he talked about her portrait that was hidden, that no one saw except for obviously the portrait artist, as well as because it was something for her husband. And she had her hair down and her lips were open a little bit, and she had a pose that her husband particularly liked from her. And it made me think of something. It made me think of something about today. So in essence, this was a Victorian selfie. This was something that we all have as independent people in this technological world that we have. We can take selfies of ourselves. We can craft our own narrative. And in essence, that's what she was doing. She was crafting her own narrative and controlling her image through the work of this painter. And it made me think about something, an exhibit that I went to at the Victoria and Albert Museum the last time I was in, not the last time, 2 times ago when I was in London. And this was Frida Kahlo's exhibit. And this is actually called Making Herself Up. And it's all about how her portraits were an act of defining her narrative and making sure that she presented herself the way she wanted to into the world. So I thought that was an interesting piecing together of the dots of how women have tried to own our own identity and own our own image, be it saucy or be it serious, be it artistic, rooted in tradition. And so I thought that was a very interesting, it sparked these connections to where we are today with all the things that people talk so negatively about, thirst posts and women taking too many selfies and all this. And this is a tradition that is not born of social media. This is something that women have always, and men too, men also take many selfies. This is a need that many people have to own their own story. So you go, Victoria, with your saucy self and your portrait. So that's it. I think that's enough gushing about Victober. I had such a blast, and I hope you enjoyed your Victober as well. If you haven't, maybe take some tips from what I did. Do a blend or a mix of audio and print. Do a mix of nonfiction and fiction. Do maybe a mix of current that looks back and set in Victorian ages. And most of all, just enjoy yourself. It was a great experience. And on to Nonfiction November and Novella November. I think it's #novnov. That's it for me. Thank you so much. Bye.